My next guest, just for fun, ran around Australia in the fastest time ever. He averaged 84 kilometres a day and did it in a row with no breaks. I don't know, I think it was 170 days, something along those lines. Anyway, also on with him is David Jones, one of our instructors, also one of our runners, and he owns a business with Sean. It used to be for First 42, getting runners through their first 42K, and now it's Sean Bell Coaching. I watched Sean's development over the last few years as he was the runner of one of my mates and DJ's best mate, Jason Cronshaw. On his first attempt to do a long run, which was Cairns to Melbourne, finishing at the MCG, Sean was running, and unfortunately, Jace died. It was a terrible year for deaths of people I know. It included Warnie and Rod Marsh, along with my father and many others. Anyway, what I found outstanding is Sean took a day or two off running, came to the funeral, but kept going because he said that's what Jace would want to do. Anyway, he continued on, and it took him 6 years to plan for this run around Australia. He goes through the highs and lows and the cost, both physically, mentally, and personally, of such an event, but also what he got out of it. It's fantastic to speak. Welcome to the Before I Forget podcast, where we go through stories and interviews of some of our athletes or athletes we know or coaches, whatever it is, anyone who inspires us that has enough time to waste to go on our show. So it's before I forget the stories and before they forget the stories. So today, it's been a long time in the making, but it's so great to have Sean Bell and David Jones in our midst. And I'll just give you a quick little background. I'm going to do a little intro that you guys won't hear. But Sean is a young guy I met through DJ I'll get to in a minute, who decided to run from Cairns to Melbourne, something like that. You know, it's a fair way. In the midst of getting ready in a 6-year plan to run around Australia and try and break the record. Well, he didn't just do that. He smashed it and he went further. Anyway, it's so good to have Sean with us. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Jock. Stoked to be here, mate. Stoked to be having a chat.
Now, he's been on TV shows and he's been on the top podcasts, but he's decided to come to the number one show in Berry Street in Cronulla. And David Jones, this idiot I met many years ago, he started to come to Sandhills, was a lawyer, but somehow he's a lawyer disguised as a personal trainer, actually. And he loves training. He sweeps 100K events for fun. So that's where you run 100Ks and bring the back markers along. Him and Jace, his great mate, used to come to Sandhills and always want to push it so hard that they had nothing left for the day, known as our less, what is it called?
Minus zero. That was a Vinny term, but the minus zero session. Yeah.
So zero left in the tank. That's it. So DJ, welcome.
Thank you very much. Coming to you live from halfway in the water at Wanda. It's beautiful.
And of course, I can't forget Sam, as always, our resident broadcaster. He's off to England very soon again. He's got a broadcasting gig on radio over there. Anyway, he's our resident cricketer. He's the one that brings the, I'm going to say, credibility to the show. Welcome, Sam.
Hey, Jogger. Always good to be here. Always very exciting. And welcome, Sean. Very honoured to have you on today, mate, and looking forward to a good chat.
Now, thanks, Sam. Great to have you here. Jump in whenever you want, Sam, if you've got a question. We're going to go through a bit of the history. Now, Shawnee, the way I met Sean was, unfortunately, I'd heard about this guy that was training with Jace, Coach Cronshaw, one of our great mates, and DJ, and his plan was to run around Australia. I've heard Sean explain his story, how he got into running, but I first met him, unfortunately, at Jace's funeral, where he stopped running from Cairns to Melbourne and came to Jace's funeral and then went back and finished off. So really emotional times, but I really appreciated that Sean took that time out to come to Jace's funeral, and he was such a good bloke. He didn't have a big head or anything, but I've heard your story, Sean, on how you got into long distance running, but let's hear it from you.
Thanks, Jock. I appreciate that. I've always loved running, to be honest. I was a footballer first and foremost, Aussie rules down here in Victoria. I dabbled with running, so school cross country, that sort of thing. I was okay at it. I'd always make it to the first stage. I think it was district, and then maybe miss out on zone and regional and state and things like that to come after. I never got there, but I enjoyed it, and that was the main thing. And then in 2016, I lost a friend and footy teammate, Joey, and losing him, I was only 18 at the time. Obviously, an enormous thing to experience so young. And to this day, the cause of his death is still unknown. So it was tragic and devastating. And I found myself turning to running even more. I think we all need that mental health outlet, and that was running for me. So I started to run more. I did a 15K fun run about 4 months after he passed away. Loved that. And then about a year later, after that 15K fun run, was my first marathon, and there was no turning back after that. So that was October 2017 Melbourne Marathon. And then early 2018, I came up with this crazy goal of running around Australia and had to put the pieces together to make it happen. So I had huge reasons why in wanting to honor my mate and make a difference for charity, but then needed to figure out the how. And that's sort of how I started to meet Jason DJ.
Yeah, and I want to just touch on. I've heard you say it before, but your mum took you to Tony Robbins.
Yes, that's right.
Can you just go wind back and tell us how that came about and why she did it? Because
Yeah, so
our parents are always so supportive of us, and it makes a big difference.
definitely, mate. Like, yeah, love my mum so much. She's always been there for me. And she recognized I wasn't doing too well after Joe had passed away. And she suggested that we go over to the US and she'd take me to see Tony Robbins. And at the time, I'd never heard of him. I was 19. So I didn't know what I was getting into, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to go to the NBA and the ice hockey. So I said, yep, mum, I've watched his video. I love him. Let's go. And then when I was there, I thought, well, this is a 4-day seminar. I realized that she'd put a lot of money in to be there and support me with it. Like, let's play full out, give it my all and see what happens and listen to all the stories with intent. And I found out about a guy called Stu Middleman who ran across the US. It was from San Diego to New York, and it was 85K a day for 56 days. And I was shocked. I was in awe. I didn't know that was possible because, of course, I was a footballer at the time. So I was sitting there in the audience thinking this guy's a predisposed genetic freak. But I returned from Tony Robbins' seminar to play footy because it was all I ever knew, and had a really great high that year. We actually went undefeated. We went on to win the grand final, and I was a premiership captain. And despite such an amazing year, I wasn't loving my footy so much. So I thought, let's try something new. And that's where 3 weeks after that grand final win was the Melbourne Marathon. And once I crossed the line in Melbourne Marathon, after all the highs and lows and a lot of lows, I think like back then I didn't know what I know now. So there was no nutrition on the run. My hydration strategy was all over the place. It's cramping at the 38K mark, but I got it done and I loved it from that moment, and decided to pursue running just like I've pursued football and give it my all.
Awesome, mate. Now, old school. No fluids, no food. Just get it done. Love it. Now, DJ, let's go over to you. Now, how did you and Jace find Sean, and what did you see in him?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just literally this morning watching back some old videos, as I like to do from time to time, that Jason and I did, sort of talking through this story back in 2020 and before, just after we'd been introduced to Sean. So we got introduced to Sean through a mutual friend, Samantha Gash, who is a incredible ultra runner and speaker in her own right. And I think Sean was doing a bunch of running at the time. I can't remember whether you reached out to her, Shawnee, or she came across you somehow, but you were talking about what you were doing and what you wanted to do, which at that point in time was to do 50 marathons in 50 days. You had this, it was sort of if I'm going to run around Australia, let's prove that I can do 50 marathons first. And so he came to us through Sam and said, this is what we want to do. And Jason and I went, yep, this sounds good. And he was, and he still is, but at that time, 5 or 6 years ago now, young bloke, just in his 20s, and just really struck both Jason and I that this was a really mature young man who, if a lot of people had come to us and said, this is what we're going to do, we would have gone, okay, well, you need to prepare a bit. But when Sean said it, we went, I reckon he probably will. And so we sort of, we'd been coaching a bunch of people at the time for ultras, but we were still developing our programming and sort of figuring out what worked best. Jace and I had started a business called V&B Athletic, which was based on these two ladies, Vicky and Barb. Barb's passed away now, and Vicky, I think, is in her mid-80s. But at the time when we came across them, they were in their late 70s. They were running ultra marathons, 100 miles, still finishing in sort of under 24 hours, 36-hour type time. And Jason and I said, well, that's, we want to be doing that when we're 70 and 80. Like and we want to coach other people so that when they start running in their 20s, they can still do it in their 80s. So we had this, a lot of what we did, and you have taught us this over time as well, Jock, it was get strong. So do a lot of work around really building strength and endurance, cutting back on the kilometers a bit. So you're not just running 100 and 200 kilometers a week like the old, marathon training used to say you do. And so we went to Sean with that. And I remember sort of 2 or 3 weeks in, Sean was calling Jace saying, I'm not running enough. I need more running in my program. You're not letting me run enough. And Jace was like, dude, just stick with the program, trust it. and it will work. And that was sort of how we sort of worked him up into the, and I think a bunch of your friends at the time, Sean, was saying, no, you're not running enough. You're never going to make it through this. And of course, once you actually started doing the 50, you just got faster every marathon and felt super strong at the end. But that was,
it was unreal. I think so when I came to Jason DJ, I did reach out to Samantha, and I met her in August of 2018, and I met with Jason DJ, at least on the phone, in early September of 2018. So it was really only 16 weeks from when I met them to then running the 50 marathons in 50 days, because they said to me, there's a lot that we need to help you get better at. You need to get stronger first and foremost. I wasn't strength training properly, but I was doing anywhere from 100 to 120K weeks. At that point, I was a nutter, and, I met with Sam Gash, 15K from home, and I ran there. Like, I thought that's what you do. If you want to be a runner, you run everywhere. And she drove me home from our coffee meeting and said, you're going to do it smarter from here on in, and I'll hand you over to the boys. So 16 weeks, that's one thing that Jace really said to me. He's like, you have a better base than you think, and we can do a lot in these 16 weeks. Let's just change, add in some more strength training, add in some greater mobility work, and you'll be a lot better for it. And I really did need to, I guess, have a couple of experiences where he, one of them, I remember he gave me a warning and said, don't do it again or I won't coach you. And that's why I'm the athlete I am today, which was, he'd programmed, like, obviously a big part of doing back-to-back running is training that back-to-back running. And I had an endurance run on the Saturday and Sunday. I think it was meant to be 30K for one of them and 25 for the other. And I did 2 marathons. And he said, you do that again, I won't be working with you. So I very quickly learned that, you better be compliant with the programming, and things started to work once I actually stuck to the program. So it was interesting that.
Well, interestingly, Sean, when DJ and Jace sort of first started coming to do Sandhills, they were telling me about their endurance runs, they're doing ultras and this sort of thing. But Jace kept telling me, cramp up in these races. And I asked him what he was doing, and he was mostly just doing boot camp.
Yeah, do as we say, not as we do, Jock. You know that by now.
Mate, I think you might need to add in a bit more running, or even a bit of running. So, everyone starts out not really knowing what they're doing, mate, and they develop over time. So, and it's always good to listen to, I even text one of my mentors. He took me from a level 3 and 4 athletics coaching, Lindsay Watson. He's a steeplechase coach, Australian steeplechase coach. And I've got a couple of runners that decided to do steeplechase. I said, mate, anytime I need help on hurdles, you're the man, because I don't know anything about them. And in fact, I don't want to learn about them. That's all yours. So, you can't know everything, and you're always learning. So, we've all gone through this, and I look back at my training diaries from when I was at university, and I actually burned a few the other day because I saw them from the 1980s and they're quite embarrassing. But at the time, we thought they were good. So Sam, just before we get onto it next, have you got anything to ask Sean?
I just wanted to ask him more about, we speak about a lot on this show about the kids. We've got a lot of youth at Jock Athletic. You mentioned you were an AFL player. You mentioned that you started running at around 18. Was there much Was there did you notice from a young age that you were fitter on the AFL field, or was there any kind of standouts? Because we've got lots of kids at Jock who rock up and you're just like, this kid just has it. Like you look at like your Layla Whites and your Kyle Masons, people just rock up and they just kill it. Was there any kind of inkling that you would be the runner that you are today, or was it just I'm
I
obsessive
used
over
to,
this and I'm gonna become a great runner?
well, Sam, I used to get run down holding the ball a lot. So I would say that no fast twitch fibers in my body. I was definitely slow. And, I always felt sometimes like when I played football, I'd given it my all, I'd run my guts out. But at the end of the game, I still felt like I had more. So clearly I was predisposed with endurance. But then I just didn't have the speed to match it. And that's why I think we also in life are drawn towards things that we excel at, that, if we love them, but we're also good at it and you're getting that feedback, then that's really important. And once I went to running and started to really pick it up, in my long distance running, I was getting results very quickly. Like we just spoke about from when I met Jason DJ, it was only 16 weeks to the 50 marathons in 50 days. And 12 weeks after that, I went over to the Bali Hope Ultra and was able to win that race when I just wanted to go the distance and give it my best. So that was a big part of it. But I think to the younger person who is listening to this, definitely identify what your strengths are. And sometimes, as you get older, it might not even be, like in my case, the sport that you're in that you then excel at later on. But I think when I was in football, I just tried to learn as much as I could from all the coaches and give it my all. And then once I came across to running, I was much better at that. But again, it was that same focus of let's just give it my all and see where it takes me. Because of course, when I ran that first marathon in October of 2017, while I loved it, it was only a few months later where I really came up with the goal of running around Australia. Because when I finished the marathon, I loved it and I thought, okay, like what do I want to do in this running? Do I want to go faster or do I want to go further? What do I want to do? And I thought back to Stu Middleman and his story running across the US. And I thought, well, if he did that, I wonder if anyone has ever run across or around Australia. And I Googled it, and then I found out about Jeanette and Alan Murray Wakeland, who were in their 60s. They were a vegan couple. Jeanette was 64 at the time and Alan 68, and they ran a marathon a day around Australia for 365 days. And I've never met Jeanette and Alan to this day, but they were such huge inspirations for me. And I thought if they could do that, respectfully to Jeanette and Alan, if they can do that at their age, then I can do this too. And from that point, I just started to get serious. And as I said, I had all the reasons why. I just needed to figure out the how. So I made running my world. Every spare minute I had, if I wasn't working my part-time job or I wasn't at uni, I was listening to running podcasts. That's how I came across Samantha. Samantha connected me with Jason DJ, and things started to move from there.
Yeah, awesome. I also just wanted to touch on, like, obviously the physical aspect of running is very important, right? You need to be fit, you need to be strong. Obviously, injuries come about, but a big part of that, especially the distances you're running, is the mental side. And how can I just want to kind of pick your brain about how mentally strong you have to be, let alone 50 marathons in 50 days, like running around Australia, and obviously being so driven from a young age, really, to have this goal and have all this prep. Is there anything different you do while you're running that you're talking to yourself? Is there anything that you notice yourself doing to get yourself mentally prepared? Because I know a lot of people struggle with long distance running. It's something that people are scared of doing because realistically they tell themselves they can't. So what do you do that's different to everyone else that's able to make you run this far without getting heaps of head noise?
Well, I think self-talk is a big one, absolutely. But for me, I've always found that it's actually just reminding myself of everything I've already achieved, everything I've already overcome. And I use that tool every day around Australia. Like every day was so hard. And so, I would be on, let's say it was day 70, and I would be thinking back to, and I had at the top of my mind the extra hard days where, I was on all fours throwing up, had blood pouring out of my nose. And it was like day 2, day 4, day 10. Day 25, day 48, day 49, they still haunt me. I still remember them off the top of my head. But that was something that I used even when I was on the run around Australia. I was like, you got through all those days and you might have been only at the 20K mark when this happened, when you were vomiting on the side of the road, and yet you continued on, you ran another 64K. So you can do it again today. And I think that like the biggest thing with long distance running is breaking it down. So yes, it was 84 Ks average a day, but my team and I only focused on 8 Ks at a time. And on the really hard days, it was one step at a time. That's where my mind went. But I talk a lot about strategic execution and, a 14,530 K run around Australia, if we include Tasmania as well. That's the distance that I ran. And yet I say that it's an estimated 1,816 pit stops. So if you want to run around Australia, break it down to 8K at a time.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Yeah, good question, Sam. We're going to move on now to the planning for this. It's one thing to say that you're going to do something like this, but as coaches in sport, it's one thing to say it, but everyone's only interested about what you do. And if you say it, you better do it in sport. And that's a big thing to say, that I'm going to run around Australia, or I'm going to run from Cairns to Melbourne, whatever it is. But you did it, mate. And that's what is so impressive from my perspective for a young bloke. But you had a 6-year plan. And now we use 4-year plans in Olympic cycles, 4-year plans in World Cups for cricket. And it's very hard for people to get that round their head that, no, everything we do leading up to that has a part in getting yourself prepared. I mean, it was 2 years to get Brett Lee to bowl 160 Ks an hour, of him giving up alcohol, of him doing every single thing right, and he broke that barrier. It hasn't been broken very many times since. So 6-year plan. Tell us about this, Sean.
It's a great question, Jock. Well, I think firstly, when I went to Jason DJ, the plan was 2021 and COVID happened and then it pushed the run back. And so looking back now, that was a blessing. I wasn't, I may have been able to run around Australia, but maybe it would be 50 or 60 K a day. Actually, when I went to Jace originally, that was going to be our plan, was 60 K a day, which is then how the Cairns to Melbourne came about, because when COVID happened, obviously to do any sort of event like this, it takes a hell of a lot of logistics and planning. And we thought, well, Cairns to Melbourne's about 3,600 K. If the campaign was 60 for 60 for 60 Ks a day for 60 days to raise 60 K for Make-A-Wish, then that would be great. And that would be an opportunity to learn for then the big one when we get there. But doing that in 2022, doing it so strong. You spoke about, I had 2 days there where I flew down to Sydney for Jace's memorial, came back. Prior to the memorial in particular, it was so hard for me. Obviously, DJ gave me a phone call. I got that news on day 7. And to try and run, an ultra marathon every single day with that news was so hard, because for me, it's such a beautiful thing when you can. I don't think many people in life can actually say this person changed my life, but that was my experience. Like, it really was. I've always dreamt as a young kid to play AFL and to be an athlete, and ultimately never made it in AFL, but I was out there running from Cairns to Melbourne being the athlete that I always dreamt of, and there was nothing more special than that. And I felt like once I said goodbye at the memorial, as hard as that was, it was then like refocus and really just have fun, because he's not going to want me to be crying as I'm running down the highway. He's going to want me to be loving every minute as much as I can. And so from that, I thought, okay, well, let's leave it all out there. That's what he would want, is just give your best. And if your best is more than 60K, go for it. And I had 70K days, 80K days. My biggest was 85. And that was a great thing, because I finished Cairns to Melbourne in the end at an average of 66K a day. And I thought, you know what, I went to the gym 48 hours after running from Cairns to Melbourne. If I can do that, then maybe there's more in me. What if I give it another 2 years? So as I matured as an athlete, I started to think again longer term, and I put some big goals in front of me. So Cairns to Melbourne was 2022. I came up with 2 really clear goals in 2023. And if I could achieve them, then I felt like it wouldn't just be believing that I could do it. It would be a true knowing that I could do it. And that's what happened. Is 2023, I ran 201K in 24 hours in the Coburg 24 hour. And then I took on BVRT 200 miler. That's 323 Ks nonstop. I didn't know if I could even go the distance, but my mindset with that was, if I could do it 323K, then what's 84K a day? And so being able to do that, and in the end, not only just going the distance, there was only 6 people in the race, but going on to win that race, it was that feeling on the other side of it was like, I know I can do this. And it was such a special feeling to think that at that point it was 5 years. By the time I get to 6 years into it, I know I can do it. And before Sam asked me about sort of the mental toughness, it's not just thinking about those other previous days that I'd already experienced that were hard on the run around Australia. It was reminding myself of the 200 miler, of all these 24 hours, of Cairns to Melbourne, of 50 marathons in 50 days. Like, we'd done this, and all of these events had built self-belief and destroyed self-doubt, as well as obviously building my body and physical capability.
So you're telling me there's only 6 idiots that would go through a 200-mile race?
That's right. That's right.
Well, mate, there's millions of people that weren't there because they weren't stupid enough. But so you beat a lot more people than 6, mate. Yeah, so that brings me to the race, and you know, there's loads we could talk on before that, and I'm going to touch back on with DJ. I'm going to give him a bit of time to think about this, about what happened when Jace passed, and then what happened when you're in a mid race. How we cope with that as DJ being his best mate. But I'm going to give him a little bit of time to work into that one. So we're going to go to the run first. Now, the best thing about this run, this was my entertainment every night on stories before I went to bed. It was like watching a TV show. And for those that don't know, Sean would put up story after story of his day, and it would always start with him getting up in the morning and looking like grandma, not being able to walk probably. But the first 2 days I'm looking at it going, how the hell's this guy going to get through this? The first 2 days, leaving, what date was it? Just remind me.
It was Sunday, March 10th. So we're nearly at the anniversary. Yeah.
Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're expecting that's going to be nice sort of weather. 39 degrees, I think it was.
Yeah.
Hills, there was vomiting, there was nosebleeds. He couldn't keep any food down. I'm going, mate, this guy's not going to get through the first week. Tell me about those first couple of days.
Mate, day 2, I spoke before about all those days that haunt me. I mentioned day 2. Day 2 was, I had 8 cans of Coke. That was pretty much my nutrition. I couldn't eat. I'd spewed 3 times by 5:30 a.m. Anyone who wants to watch back, like you spoke about how hard it was in the mornings and all of these things, I've still got the story highlights on my Instagram. So you can actually go back and relive that. And yeah, day 2, it was 39 degrees again. I definitely didn't, while I'd prepared with my training, I wasn't smart enough with some of the other things like clothing and sunwear protection. And so, I'd had some heat exhaustion from day 1 and then was again exposed day 2. It was stupid. Fast forward to, say, Townsville, we had that dialed in, and, I was in the spams for my arms to support myself. I was covered up with my face, all of that. And I think that coming into day 2, I always laugh about that. One of my mates said it looked like Shawnee's big run around Australia from the MCG to Traralgon. But yeah, there was a lot of head noise there, big time. And I just, again, had to think, just get through today. This is so hard, but you can do 80K or 84, just get through that, just get through today. And I was able to find a way. And again, it was breaking it down. Like, I have to give so much credit to my team, because it was on those days, instead of stopping every 8K, it might have been stopping every 5. So that made their job harder. But again, it was to be able to have everything to cool me down, ice down the back of my neck, or, all my electrolytes sorted. So all of these things is why I could do it. And it was a pretty epic journey. But day 2, mate, that haunts me.
Well, that's I don't know how you did that, but that just leads in beautifully to your support crew. One thing I did want to say before I got into your support crew was ultra distance running, and people go through so many emotions. But what I loved about it on these days is there'd be videos of you vomiting and throwing your heart up and bleeding from your nose, and then in the next second you'd be standing up and go, okay, let's go on. So that was beautiful. But that leads me, and he said, I have to thank my support crew. Now, I watched the support crew, and there were 2 for me that really stood out. And I'm just going to, as a coach, this was a beautiful thing to see. They were always upbeat. They always had your back. They always made things light. And I'm going to announce, you've got to tell me who they are: Undertaker and Nose Tampon.
Well, Undertaker is Mitch Viney. Mitch loves feet. So, he got the unfortunate role of looking after my feet at night. And that's pretty stiff. And then what's even more stiff, it's stiff managing my feet, but then it's stiff when I'm having the luxury of that, and then I grab the camera and start filming and go, you know what, Mitch loves feet, and that became him. So
Yeah, I was not liking that. I thought this guy's doing everything for you, and you're giving it to him. And
yeah.
so, Mitch, I'm on your side, mate.
Yeah, Mitchy, the Undertaker was unreal. And then
Yeah, but tell us about the Undertaker.
well,
What
he
was the
just like
Undertaker?
we both loved WWE growing up, and that was him. That was Mitchy as well. He would just come in, and the Undertaker's whole thing was, when he would enter into the ring, it was dark. There was the music. You didn't know what was going on. He'd look at you with this eye roll, and that's what Mitchy was doing. So
To wake you up in the morning.
yeah, so hard to wake up. I've probably slept 2, 3 hours. I'm staring at the ceiling. I'm in pain. I'm waking up during the night, and I'm thinking, here we go again, and trying my best to really just enjoy it, remind myself of the big why in making a difference for these sick kids, and also just how lucky I was. Like, it was a true privilege to do that for 6 months. So while I'm there, try and enjoy it. But some of those days were so hard, and Mitchy comes in and he's giving me the Undertaker eye roll. It just flipped me into laughing, and then that was such a big thing. So he was huge. Definitely a great support. Tampon up the nose, I'm not 100% sure. That might have been M Forster at the start of the run. I think I had the tampon up the nose regularly, so that was sort of
that was a Chloe
and then
Anderson, I reckon.
and then yeah, Chloe, I think as well, made sure of the tampon up the nose throughout. Like, Chloe was so supportive throughout the run, and I couldn't have done it without her. Honestly, 32 crew members, like, that's huge, but that's how many people there were, and I couldn't have done it without every single one of them. And that's like a run around Australia of this magnitude, all of the planning, like, that's coordinating people's annual leave and things like that. But some people even dropped in at the drop of a hat when we needed it. So yeah, I'm very blessed to have such great friends.
Yeah, so for me and Sam, I'm sorry I'm talking on this so much, but I saw it every day, and I text DJ one day. I saw Chloe patting Sean on the back, him vomiting his heart up multiple times, blood pouring out his nose. And she wasn't disgusted. She was just going, oh, sweetie. And then she'd stick a tampon up his nose and off he'd go and running. And the tampon was to stop the nosebleeds, which should be patented because that's the best thing I've ever seen. But those two, they were always so upbeat. And Sean, you always had a great attitude. I never saw you lose your temper. I saw you down, but the way you responded to your support staff too was a really good setup. But those two really shone about. Chloe would cheerlead you as you came into
Yes, you would, yeah.
or a break. But Mitch was just, he's dressing up in suits. I did see Forrest Gump arrive, but we'll get to that one too. But just before that, DJ told me something. Before you started, that there was an injury concern on your foot or your ankle before you even started the race. So
Yeah.
I'll go to DJ to see what he remembered, and then I'll get your take on it, Shawnee.
Yeah, no, it was pretty. Well, it wasn't funny at the time. It's been funny in hindsight. And at the time, we were going, I hope this is all okay, because then it'll be a great story to tell afterwards. But the training in the lead up had obviously been pretty heavy. Sean had done a lot of, was doing a lot of work in the gym. So he was probably 10, 12 kilos heavier than you would normally be, Shawnee, for a run of this magnitude.
I usually like to sit around 80 kilos, and I was up to 88. I remember talking to you, Jock, about the body composition, when you ran with me through Sydney.
Yeah. So he was, and so pretty close to the time, maybe 6 weeks out or so. He's like, I'll just, go and stay with Chloe. I'll do a few runs. I might do a bit of a fast 5K and just push it hard. And then before you know it, it's like, there's probably a little bit of a problem with my leg. It's probably just a bit of a muscle issue that'll be fine. And then went and got some scans, and it was a lot more serious than a little muscle issue. And at the time, obviously, Sean's locking in sponsors, and you've got to say, let's come out and run in our shoes and do a bit of a demonstration for the camera and have a bit of a sprint. He's in absolute agony. Didn't run at all for a good couple of weeks just to try and get things right. But then went into the run with what most people would see as quite a serious injury, and just we've figured out that provided you kept the pace slow enough. And that was the goal with this. If you're going to do 84 Ks a day, you're not doing 4-minute Ks, you're doing 6 minutes plus and probably a bit slower. Then the pain was manageable in that. And we're just like, well, let's just hope it sort of heals itself over the next 6 months.
Yeah, tibia stress. It was a lot.
I assumed it was a stress fracture, but Jace Deej wouldn't tell me that.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone. Don't tell
I
anyone.
know we're keeping this very quiet.
Yeah, we had to. And like that was really hard. As DJ said, I was at the time meeting with sponsors. I had my Strava on private. I was saying, yeah, of course I'm ready in 19 days. And I just had to believe it because, again, everything was locked in. Crew had committed to annual leave dates. I had Apollo Motorhomes commit a motorhome for that length of time, but only on those set dates because they blocked it out from other people hiring it. So it was just like, whatever happens, this could be a really hard thing for me and something that, ultimately I could be perceived as a failure if I go into this injured and it doesn't work, but I have to take the risk. Like one of the biggest things from a mental standpoint was remind myself, I might have been injured for 8 weeks leading in, but this is 6 years. This is not 8 weeks. And I kept reminding myself that. And as DJ said, one of the big strategies became in the first couple of weeks, initially, I worked off 12 and 3. So run for 12 minutes, walk for 3. And that just really helped. That way I wasn't overloading too much. I was also giving my cardio a chance because while I tried to do some off legs conditioning in those 8 weeks, I definitely wasn't running 84K a day. So therefore, that was an opportunity to bring the heart rate back down. I would use that for my nutrition breaks and hydration breaks. So it would work really well. And then within a few weeks, I dropped maybe, 4 or 5 kilos. And it made an enormous difference just being around that, again, 80K mark, 80 kg mark. I think there were times I remember in between Darwin and Broome because I had Mum and Chloe in my crew. And, it's only like a mother's nature to not want to see their son living off 2 liters of ice cream a day and 8 cans of soft drink. So she started to change the nutrition and give me salad wraps. Well, I don't think she understood the calories part of it. So, I'm having these salad wraps and water instead of soft drink and cake, and understand and not realizing why I have no energy and I'm cooked and I'm saying to Chloe, something's not right. And we jump on the scales, which we should have been doing every single day, but we weren't. And I was down to 76 and we had to quickly make some changes again. So yeah, it was definitely a team effort. There's so many factors that go into all of that. But in the initial stages, actually getting a little bit lighter was the right thing to do. And, I think that I'm so grateful for the team at Pivot Sports Performance who helped me with my strength work going into the run. I was strong. There's no question about that, but it definitely a little bit heavy. And I think that I can't just, have that as the reason for the stress fracture. I think stress fractures occur when we're under so much stress, which I was. I was still trying to work full time with First 42K. I was trying to train and do 90 to 120K weeks of running plus 3 strength sessions. I was trying to pull together all the sponsors for the run and support crew. I was doing too much ultimately. And that's, something we all need to share with our athletes is that the body only knows stress and you've got to get that balance right.
Yeah, amazing. And those first couple of months, I was just watching going, I wonder when he's going to start limping from this stress. But mate, brilliant to get through that. And now we followed you around and then you got to WA and WA seems pretty big. Took quite a while to get through. Tell me how that was mentally and how good it was to get, Forrest Gump to run along at stages and just the lift it gave you to get new crew in that, did different stupid things.
Yeah, it was huge. I reached WA Northern Territory border day 81, and I left WA day 139. So yeah, it's massive. And I think, once the new crew came in from Broome, Mitch Loves Feet, who we spoke about before, Lucia and Kieran, that was hard as well because at other times the crew, we'd try and coordinate as much as we could to have at least one crew member stay on. So for example, that might have been majority of the crew fly out at Gold Coast while one extra crew member stays on to the sunny coast to have that handover. They all came in as fresh crew and had to figure it out on the go. But they just really worked hard to make sure that, I was having fun and they would do that through things like dressing up as a flamingo. They all got involved in the sponsor reels that we needed to do, which made it fun. They were very big on my nutrition. Of course, you need to, eat junk food and fun food while you're out there from a calorie standpoint, but you also need whole foods to feel good. And they were big on that. I remember Lucia was like, no, you can have your first sun-kissed and cans of Coca-Cola at 1 or 2 p.m. And I was like, no, Lou, I've been having this at 6 a.m. She said, I don't care. So, and I don't think that's a coincidence that my best running actually was from Broome South. So from Broome to Perth, I was averaging around 87, 88K a day. I really lifted it again, probably got a bit too excited. And then once I hit Perth and started to come east again across Australia back to Melbourne, I started to really hit a wall. But just so fun having a crew, as you said, doing those things like dress ups was enormous, and that continued. Once I got down to Perth and then across all the way to Melbourne, I had Mally, and he was dressing up as a horse because I was yelling out "Giddy up" all the time. All the crew just gave me a huge lift, and as we've said, couldn't have done it without him.
And who knew you'd be the cow whisperer?
Unreal, wasn't it? Like I love cows. Like every time I would be running, they'd be running with me. I'd stop, they'd be stopping and looking at me, and then I'd continue, and we just had fun with it.
For those that don't know, he'd start mooing at the cows, and then they'd start looking at him. And all of a sudden, he'd get them to run along with them.
Yeah.
So who needs a cattle dog when you got Shawnee? And mate, I'm going to throw to Sam in a sec. So Sam, think of your next question because he's got to go shortly. He's got his next, he's on radio or TV. I don't know what he's on. But what did you learn from the actual whole ordeal? What was the most you learned about yourself or about people?
Yeah, I think that what I learned about myself, like first part of the question, is like I think this applies to really everyone. Is if you're going to do something this big, give it years. We always have this tendency to, okay, I really want to do that, but I want to do it in a few months. Well, no, give it years. Because I was so consistent and because I was so patient, I was able to reap the reward. There were times throughout the run where, of course, I was riddled with self-doubt, thinking, am I going to be able to do this? But the team around me, that other part of the question, like I learned people can be so loving, so caring, and for people to give up so much time as volunteers to crew, it was enormous. And we just worked as a team. Like we really sort of had this goal of best we can be every day and giddy up and have fun. And giddy up it was my thing, but it became our thing. Let's just like get through it. Like just giddy up, get through another day. And, I learned so much on that journey, but consistency and patience is probably number one. And earlier we spoke about Tony Robbins. And I remember one of the other things I picked up at that seminar, and I didn't know what that meant at the time, because of course at the time I was sitting there in the audience, I was a footballer, I wasn't a runner, I wasn't going to do this goal. But I remember he said something, a quote that stuck with me. And he said that most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. And I think if you look at my experience of my first marathon late 2017 to then record holder around Australia in August 2024, that's a testament to that. And sometimes we don't feel like we're progressing, but if you just show up each day, you are, and let that compound over years, and you can run around Australia in record time.
Awesome. Well, I think DJ and I, we've sort of taken that aboard, and we haven't peaked yet. We've been going for a long time. We're still looking for that peak.
I should say, Jock, I was just going to make one point that, and you sort of referred to it a bit before, but like the one thing that no one ever saw and never happened in 6 months of Sean running around the country was he never blew up at his crew. Like he was always, no matter how rough he was, injured he was, tired he was, hungry, whatever was going wrong, he was always, and you see like pretty much every second of the thing was documented. He was just always polite to his crew and recognizing the fact that they gave up a lot of their time and effort and jobs and money to be there for him. And it's sort of something that I think you see a little bit now in the ultra running scene in some of these big things. People go, oh, he's blowing up at the crew, but that's okay because he's tired and exhausted or whatever. Like it's not okay and that sort of thing. And I think Sean set a really great example for people in the way he conducted himself on that run, because you've got to recognize that these people are giving up a massive amount, and you can't, running's a solo sport in many ways at these distances, but ultimately it's not. You can't do it by yourself. So I thought that was so. I mean, I knew him anyway, so I assumed that was how he would conduct himself. But it was so nice to see that, you know, throughout that whole 6 months, and I knew a lot of what was going on behind the scenes and when things weren't working out, and still he never took it out on the crew, which I think was really, you know, and I know you saw that as well. That was really cool.
Brilliant. And we see that with athletes, and you know, they're your favourite, aren't they? You know, Sam, before he's got to race off, Sam, give us a rundown of our sponsor and any more questions you've got, mate.
Well, very quickly, our sponsor for today is once again Authentic Apparel. Taking care of all your apparel needs. If you ever need any apparel, sportwear, if you're looking to run around Australia and you're looking for some merchandise, head up to Kirrawee at Authentic Apparel and we'll sort you out. But back onto Shawnee. I've got two quick questions, mate. The first one is, you know, I've already spoken on the mental side. It's something I get really fascinated about, and I think sport, as much as it is physical, is very mental. Well, as we all know, it is very mental, but I over obsess about it. Waking up every morning, right? Obviously, you get up to go to work in the morning, 5 a.m. No one wants to get up. This wasn't exactly getting up for work in the morning. This was getting up, understanding that you're going to be in pain for the next 15 hours.
Yeah.
You had the Undertaker. You had those little things. Was there anything else that you'd wake up and think, like, let's go? Was there anything you said to yourself? Was there anything that you motivated yourself with? And you spoke about, you know, day one, day two, getting there. But like, was there something like get your feet on the floor? Was there get outside? Was there, you know, let's run some cold water in my face? Like, what actually got you up in the morning?
Such a great question, Sammy. To be honest, it was get through to sunrise. That was a huge one. We talked about breaking it down. That was huge for me. The mornings were dreadful. They were the hardest of everything. And I've had that experience, you know, through years of racing, whether it's 100 miles, 200 miles. The night sections are so hard, but once the sun hits you, you know, your body's more naturally awake. Get a bit of caffeine in the system, feel better. But when you ask that question, what I immediately thought of is I just honestly would lay there before I get into the day and remind myself of all my reasons why. It's something as a keynote speaker I talk about is a concept called why stacking. Too often we focus on the how, like, how am I going to do this? This is so hard. How am I going to do it? But if you have so many reasons why to drive you, then you're never going to quit, no matter what happens. You might be hurting, but if I have about 10, 15 reasons that are driving me to run around Australia, then I'm going to get that done. And like, you know, off the top of my head, I can share with you, honor Coach Jace, honor my teammate Joey, make a difference for these sick kids, and bring hope and happiness to them and their families. For the 16-year-old bench warmer on the footy field, it was me. A story I haven't shared that, you know, in my under-17s grand final, I played 16 out of 80 minutes. And that drove me to be the athlete that I am today. So for the 16-year-old bench warmer, for the kid who always dreamt of being an athlete, for everyone who followed along and donated to Make-A-Wish, for my support team who, you know, whether it was coaches like Jason DJ or my physio or my strength coach or my dietitian or my massage therapist, everyone who supported me over 6 years. Honestly, I could continue. There are so many reasons that is why I was able to do what I could do, because you don't just think about one, you think about all of them, and that drives you every single day. And that's how I got up when I could barely stand up, and I had to just walk and shuffle at the beginning, and then I could get into a run and just break it down every single day.
That's awesome. That's such a good response. I appreciate that. I had two more questions. First off, you spoke about the bad days, right? You spoke about day 2, day 10, day 25, whatever it was. Did you have any good days? Was there any days that stood out to you that you were like, you get back to the caravan, it's your last stop, you're going to bed, you went, you know what? Today was a good day. I actually enjoyed today.
Definitely, mate. There were great days. I mean, of course, like, it hurts. It's why I'm doing it. Like, it's ups and downs, but there were great days and real outliers in those great days. Like, one of them I remember was day 106, and it was like maybe outside of day one, it was my fastest day. And everyone's like, how's he done that? On day 106, I remember some people, you know, in the comments on Strava, like, is this right? Like, this data doesn't look right. How have you done this? And I was like, it is. Phil Gore ran with me today. That would explain it. So I was blessed to have, you know, Australia's greatest ultra runner, Phil Gore, come out and not only run with me, but crew me for 7 weeks. And you know, that was on his long service leave. That was huge. I learned so much from Phil. And yeah, just got excited when he came and ran with me. Obviously, For Phil, it was a much slower pace than he's used to. So he probably, without meaning to, brought me along a little bit quicker on day 106. But I was able to do it. And I thought, okay, this is good. Like extra hour of sleep tonight. Well, day 107 didn't feel great. And the days that followed because of the intensity.
And well, yes, okay. The last question is, you've done 50 marathons in 50 days. You've been to Vietnam. You've ran around Australia. What is next for Sean Bell? Is there anything that's on your mind that's going to come up? And what's the next big project? What are we going to see you doing next?
In terms of from a running standpoint, hand on heart, there isn't one just yet. I'm sure there will be one day, but right now I'm still recovering from this one, and I want to share that because and this is someone who's prepared for 6 years for this and is still now massively struggling on the back of it. I'm having some real issues with fatigue some days, and honestly just had a blood test this morning to see if I've got chronic fatigue. So it's been hard. I've got Freiberg's disease in my foot, which is a squashed metatarsal bone effectively. So much repeated impact with running, repeated trauma has made the head of my metatarsal flat rather than round. And now I'm dealing with foot pain. So whenever you do anything like this, you put your body on the line for so long, there's got to be a cost associated to that. And I think it's something I'm passionate about speaking about, even as a speaker, is no matter what someone's pursuit, maybe it's something in a completely different field. They've got their full-time income, but they're starting a side hustle. Like communication is everything. If you're having that, you're taking extra time to do this, well, there's sacrifices that need to be made and there's a cost to all of that. So I wish I knew, and I'd be naive to think that I'd get away scot-free, but I wish I knew, the cost that would be associated with this. And I don't think I would have changed it, at least at this point. Like I left it all out there and I'm so proud of that. But I want to be real. If this is affecting me in years to come, then maybe I would second guess and have a think about this, because running is so integral to my mental health. It's made me the person who I am. It means so much to me that I hope I don't lose that quality of life with running that DJ spoke about earlier, like Vicky and Barb. I want to be running 100 miles when I'm 80 and 90. So, I think there will be something one day, but right now it's about doing all the right things from a recovery standpoint and then figure out what that is. And I'm sure the next one I'll go all in, but it'll be a lot more condensed so that I have not such a long recovery period on the other side.
Yeah, lovely.
Well, fantastic questioning, Sam, because that leads us into the injury news. So, mate, you have to go.
I do have to go, unfortunately. I apologise for leaving, Sean. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Jocko, pleasure as always. DJ, thank you for joining us.
Cheers, Sammy.
I'll see everyone on the next episode live from Kirrawee.
Thanks, Sammy.
Thank you.